So for people that don't know you, let's start with letting them get to know you just a little bit. So can you tell us tell me as if I don't know, about tell me about you and your family. How many kids do you have? Just tell me a little bit about your life situation.
Okay, so hi everybody. I'm Christy. Um, I have three children, three human children, and then I have six furry ones. I have two dogs and four cats. And yes, that means I'm very busy. Um, on top of that, I volunteer with a local community action agency and Head Start service. And as well, I am a certified lactation counselor, and I am working on becoming a certified doula through DONA International, which is Doulas of North America. It is the most recognized doula organization in the world. And I'm a parenting advocate first and foremost. I want to make sure that parents' voices are heard, but I'm also a very strong believer in autonomy. As women, we tend to have our voices hushed. We tend to be told what to do, and we tend to be told that the things that we think and feel are wrong because we need to somehow fit into a society that was not built for us. And so
Yes.
I work to help women honor their sacred cycles within their bodies as well as within the earth so that they can feel a little bit more at home and comfortable within their own bodies.
Oh my God, I love that so much because I think that's like what I mean, obviously that's my central core is how do we feel more comfortable being us rather than you talked about such a big problem out there that is especially with mothers. Like I feel like mothers in general suffer the worst of it because everybody has a fucking opinion about how you're supposed to parent, mother, breastfeed, don't breastfeed formula, and everybody always feels like they're doing it wrong. I like when I look at the sheer volume of advice that's out there, I feel like there is enough evidence for everything for anyone to be able to prove that no matter what it is that you're doing, you're damaging your children irreparably and it's wrong. Which is what a scary place to be. Like it seems like a really scary and lonely place to be. So I'm curious, like how did you get into that? Because like were you always into this or did it like was it something that evolved after one of your children? Like how did this story happen for you?
So this is a great question, and it's one that I've been trying to figure out the real answer to as well. Because, like, who wakes up one day and is just like, I want to teach people to be a witch or whatever? Like, nobody thinks that, but it's something that it has always called to me. But I am a victim of this mindset. I grew up in this patriarchal society, and I grew up with the thoughts that if you're sick, you take a pill. If there's something wrong, you take a pill. If there's, nobody wants to do the hard work of doing the things that need to be done to stay healthy. Now, I'm
Mm.
not saying that medicine doesn't have its place. Modern medicine obviously has a place. My husband is a type 1 diabetic and relies on medical, artificial insulin to survive. Um, but it has a place and it's not the right choice for everybody at the right time or at the same time. There's a huge variety here. And so for as long as I could live, as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be the old crone.
Me too. Oh my
Which
God,
is
me
like
too.
it's such a weird thing to say. Who wants to be that little old lady? Like you think about the witch in the woods and
Mhm.
how, or when I was a kid, there was always the witch in the neighborhood, and you would like run really fast past her house because she was the witch and she was going to get you. I wanted to be that lady that lived in that house.
Oh my God, me too. Totally. I used to dream about having the house at the end of the street that I scared kids from. I'd be like, get away from my house, you kids.
Yes, like I didn't want to be mean, but like I wanted to have that air of mystery about me. And I
Mhm.
wanted to be that medicine woman that people sought out for her wisdom, and the person who had that knowledge that seems to have been lost on the younger generation that could pass that down. And so I came to realize that I needed to create this. I needed to find a way to make this happen. And I'm not going to find it in this weird colonial patriarchal society surrounded around capitalism where we have to make money to make things happen.
Mhm.
That's not how human beings were designed to live. So you have to do what you do with the tools that you have at your disposal, but at the same time you can create something new. You just have to have the time and energy to dedicate to it. So I started out with birth because that's what I knew. I had my first child and I had some problems and complications, and I was like, what went wrong? Where did the disconnect happen? I had this vision of a birth that I was going, I believed in birth. I believed that human beings are born to give birth to other human beings, and that's how we perpetuate our species. But things didn't go right, and I had to have an induction, and there was a huge tear, and she had a birth injury, and she had to go to NICU, and it was a whole thing. And I was like, how did this happen? And it happened from a single intervention, and it became a domino effect where more interventions were necessary because of the first intervention. And then the next intervention caused a problem, and the next intervention caused a problem that needed, the cure starts to cause different problems, and you have to
Mhm.
mitigate your side effects. And so all that time, I just smiled and nodded and said, okay, you're the expert, you know best, right? And the more I learned, the more I realized they aren't the experts and they don't know best. And again, modern medicine has its place, and there are things that save lives, but at the same time, not every cure works for every person and for every
Yeah.
situation. And so you need to be able to speak up, and you need to be able to say, like, hey, that's not me, that's not what I want, that's not what I need right now. And how do you find that voice? And so I wanted to become an advocate for other people who also had these problems, which is how I actually came into doulaing, because you are your most vulnerable when you're giving birth, and you aren't in your logical mindset, and so it's
Mhm.
harder to have that voice when you're in the moment. And you need somebody who can speak up for you, as somebody who knows what they're doing. And then that also led me into not just how to give birth, but how to mother. And how to mother is more than just giving birth to a child or adopting a child, as the case may be, but it's also about taking care of yourself, your family, your community, and beyond. And that's what leads me to becoming a matrascence coach. And helping women along the journey past birth and beyond, as 2 to 3 to 5 years, as your body goes through physical changes, emotional changes, hormonal changes, and you have mental changes as you try to figure out where you fit into society,
Mhm.
how society is and how you want it to be, and how you can find your place in the world.
So much to unpack there, but I think there was one line there that I want to latch on to because I remember when you told me this the first time and I was like, what? Did you just what? You said that you want to help people, you want to work with people through all the changes. And when you talked about the changes that happen, you didn't talk about, hey, you're pregnant and you have a baby and now, oh, you've come home because almost like there's books everywhere. What baby's first week home, baby's first month home. Everything's always about like the babies in the first couple of years, right? Where that's where the big change has happened in your life. But when you and I started talking, you told me, I'd love for you to explain this a little bit better. Like that mother, like the process of becoming a mother, like the cycle of it is more, it's like, I was like, oh, it's 10 months. I know this. And you're like, yeah, no, it's not that either. Can you tell us a little bit about how long this cycle actually is? Like, how does it go?
So it starts with conception, right? And there's cycles within the cycle. You got to think of it as like gears within a clock, where one cycle fits to another cycle, fits to another cycle, but the whole thing is all one clock, right? So it starts with conception. Actually, it starts before that. It starts with your menstrual cycle, right? So we all have our menstrual cycles as women, or as people who have uteruses, I should say. We all have a menstrual cycle, which keeps our bodies on a clock. And sometimes that clock is a little out of sync or whatever, but everybody has this clock that happens within their body and what's normal for them. And the way that your cycle goes, you have your bleed, your menses, and then you're in this phase, and then you have ovulation, and then you're in the luteal phase, and it's during ovulation that you become pregnant. So that changes the cycle, and you go into a different one if you get pregnant. Your first trimester is terrible. Starting around the second trimester is when your body starts to be like, oh yeah, we're actually going to have this baby. And your body starts to change its hormones, and that's usually when like morning sickness ends, for example. But your body is gearing up to have a baby at that point. At about 14 weeks is usually when it happens for most people, which is really early, I know. But so then when you finally get into the third trimester, your body is like, we're going to do this, but emotionally you're like, what?
The other gears
And
like stop to the one with the emotions. It's like, I'm
yeah,
sorry, I'm still 14. What the hell? Like it's like
yeah,
I
you're like,
must feel like a kid. I'm not ready to be a mom.
yes, for sure. And then so you have the baby, the placenta detaches, and the minute the placenta detaches from the uterus, your body starts making new hormones, because now you're no longer pregnant, you are a mother. You have given birth. You have created offspring, and now it's outside of your body. And so now your body enters this new phase. And it actually stays in this phase for as long as you breastfeed, basically, even a little bit beyond then, until you wean. If you choose not to breastfeed, the cycle is a little bit shorter for you, but you still have to go through these emotional changes that follow your hormones. It's a hormonal change. Um, these hormones include things like oxytocin, which is a whole thing that is a whole nother podcast on its own. Then it includes prolactin, and all sorts of different hormones that help your body adjust to maintaining a human life outside of you. The physical becoming a mother is not just the act of giving birth. It is actually the 2 to 3 year journey for most people. Some people it's up to 5 years. And it's a whole physical, hormonal, and emotional, as well as emotional shift that happens within you. It's not just 4 to 6 weeks and you go back to work. It's more than that. Even if you didn't breastfeed, like it's still more than that. Your body is still healing. The placenta is the size of a dinner plate when it comes out of you.
That is probably the most horrifying thing I've ever heard.
It's
But I've seen it and it is huge. I was a
yeah.
little bit surprised. I was like, still a living creature on its own.
Yes,
No wonder
it's
they
a
make
whole
steaks out of
organ.
it.
Yeah. So it's 10 inches on average. It's a whole dinner plate that comes out of you. That's a big hole that needs to be healed. And your uterus does contract back down, which is what stops the bleeding at birth. But it's still a giant gaping hole that needs to heal. And it takes longer than 4 to 6 weeks for it to really fully heal, usually. And so it's a physical shift, it's an emotional shift, and primarily it's a hormonal shift. And that brings a whole range of psychological issues along with it as you try to fit yourself back into society because you've changed and society hasn't. And it feels like nobody understands how you are different. It's like the butterfly that has just come out of its cocoon. You went in as a caterpillar and everybody around you was just like, oh yeah, little caterpillar went in there. And then you come out and now you're suddenly a butterfly, but nobody else realizes that that butterfly is the same as that caterpillar that went in. You still have all your memories, you still you, but you're different somehow. And I bring that up, the caterpillar thing, because there actually has been science experiments done on caterpillars and butterflies where they did a test with a caterpillar and it had to push a button or whatever, or however it was that it did it. And then when it came out as a butterfly, it still remembered and it still knew that if it
Remembered
touched
like
that
the
thing,
button.
yeah, it would still get a shock if it pushed the wrong button or whatever. So it still wouldn't push the button. So that means that even though it turns into complete goo and it comes out as a whole new creature, it still remembers that. Their memories carry on. And it's just like that for becoming a mother. You were that person, but your memories carry on. And now you're a whole different being and you don't know how to be.
That it's kind of like when you think about it, it's almost like adolescence, like, because like I feel like we treat adolescence as like a 3 to 4 year process where we're like, we recognize that when you're like 9 to like 14, you're just in a weird phase, you're in a weird stage, all these hormones are coming, and like we make a lot of allowances, and we really do. Like, I know for my like that when I meet kids who are, between that age area, I know what kind of stage of life they're in. And I recognize the process. But I feel like the way that you're describing this, it's almost as if we don't give motherhood that same process, length where it's like, oh, you're pregnant. Oh, you've got 4 years of motherhood, like adolescence coming, or whatever it is, where you're learning all of this. So like, it's almost like you walk back in, and when I think about the way that you're describing this, it really is like business as usual. So like, I go off, I get pregnant, I have a kid, and I come back, and the way that like, because I can think of me doing this in emails as well, where I'm like, oh, so and so just came back from maternity leave, right? As in recently came back from maternity leave. But just saying that makes it seem like honestly, it makes it seem like you don't really fully appreciate the fact that somebody didn't just come back from maternity leave. They literally created a human being, did all these things, that this person is in a completely different space in their mind than they were before. But it's like business as usual. Um, that's real. So I'm curious. Okay. So like when I think about a mother in that space, right? Because our healthcare, our parental leave in America is, as we all know, just abysmal. And I can't even, I don't even want to call it parental leave because it's like that's such a joke. It's like it's the time that is given to new parents to be with their children. But it's a joke. And how do you feel like that treatment? Because it's like nobody's trying like to be an asshole, but it doesn't matter. Like the treatment of parents in terms of not having a lot of parental leave for the fathers, or for the mothers being treated as if business as usual. How does that impact you as a mom? Like in terms of, does it like lonely, isolating, overwhelming? Like what's it does it do to a person?
Well, this is a fantastic question. Touching back to, you mentioned just like adolescence, that it's a physical and it's an emotional and it's a hormonal change that our bodies go through, is literally the exact same. And it's interesting because science society knows that adolescence exists, right? You were a child, and then there's this transitional period before you're actually an adult. And we also know that it doesn't stop at the age of 18, right?
Right.
We know science has proven now that the brain is not fully developed into adulthood until a little bit closer to 25.
Mhm.
Um, and so, but we don't treat 18-year-olds as children anymore. That now it's suddenly cut off. Here's your date. This is it. Now
Yeah.
you're an adult. And we don't think about that transition between 18 and 25. Society doesn't want to think about that because they want them to become productive. So now coming back to birthing people who have given birth and having to go back to work right away, again, it comes back to being productive. It comes back to this capitalist society, this patriarchal society, because men don't have to do this.
Mhm.
People that don't have uteruses don't have to go through this. And the people that typically hold the power, hold the money, hold the control over the society are the ones who make the rules, and therefore they make everybody fit into these molds.
Mhm.
Um, we treat dogs better than we treat birthing humans, because a mom dog that gives birth to a litter of puppies, we always give them 6 to 8 weeks with their mom, right? Almost always.
Oh my God. I never thought of that.
There's very few instances where anybody will say it's acceptable to take a dog less than 6 weeks away from their mom. 8 weeks is better. 9 to 10 is even good if you find a really good breeder, right? You give that dog 9 to 10 weeks with their mom, sometimes 12 weeks with their mom, and that's a good breeder, right? That's an ethical breeder who gives their dogs that kind of time. But we don't do that to human beings. We say 4 weeks, you got to go back to work. 6 weeks if you're lucky. And maybe, just maybe, you can pull off 8 weeks or maybe up to 12 through FMLA, through our, Family Medical Leave Act. And that isn't paid. It's not guaranteed to be paid. That's just, we can't fire you within 12 weeks of you leaving your job.
Mhm.
Um, but we don't give human beings the same dignity that we give to dogs. And so, yeah, it hurts a mother to have to leave her child. There is a physical, I know you've never gone through this personally, but it's gut wrenching. It's like, think of the worst feeling ever, like nails on a chalkboard, whatever nails on a chalkboard is to you. That's how it feels to leave your infant, because nature intends the mother and the baby to stay together. And nature will do whatever it can to make sure that they stay together, because that's how the baby survives, right?
Right.
So you literally, down in your gut, you feel this wrenching. And of course, I feel this now, even though my kids aren't here. And my youngest is 7 months. So like, and I know he's safe, and I know he's, but he's not here with me, and he should be here with me, and I should be holding him right here, because we are a carrying species. We are not nesting species where we just put the baby down and leave him there like a bird or a bunny. We are a carrying species. And so to be physically separated from your child hurts. And you have to find a way to suppress that. And you have to find a way to bury it, because you have to be productive, because you have to earn a living, because you have to pay the mortgage. You have to be able to buy groceries. You have to put gas in your car. You have to provide for your family. Um, and there's a weird disconnect that we treat dogs better than people.
I I know you saw me like I'm gonna need a minute on this one. It's like I feel like you really that realization was really hard because like I don't think I ever thought that. And then when you said that, I was like, what? And then of course as you described it, like I was like, oh my God, like I could see it. And then it hurts a lot for me. I know I've never experienced it myself, but I'm very empathetic. And so it hurts.
Yes, and that's
I
exactly what I was like. Whatever that feeling is, that nails on a chalkboard, that's it. But it's
I'm
to
feeling it
be,
right now.
yes, like I can feel it all in my chest, all the way down to my pelvis. It starts literally at my collarbones, and it's a visceral feeling. I can feel it down to my hips, between collarbones and hips, that my body is aching to hold my baby here.
right, where he's supposed to be. So,
Yeah.
okay, so this is all right. Hold on one second. Now that I've lost my train, thank you very much for those tears. Give me a second. Let me just sort myself out here. Okay. Oh, actually, this is, I got to be really honest. I feel like our conversation is going naturally how I had written everything out. Like I was like, oh, these are all the questions I want to ask. But other than doing the last question first, we're really sliding right in naturally. So that was very profound. So here's what my question is for you now. Because you mentioned that, oh, I took off my glitter. Okay. You mentioned that it's all about being productive. And it's super interesting, not in a fun way, but in a bad way. I took a class with Toy Smith about the connection between, I know I love Toy Smith. She's amazing. And she has this amazing course that I recommend everyone take. Like everyone in the world needs to take this, every white person especially, because it really helps to understand a lot about our capitalist and patriarchal society. But it talks about something very similar because you kept mentioning that it's about productivity. It's about productivity. And that's very like back in the, during the, when we were bringing Black Africans over here to create the plantations, and slavery was a big industry. Productivity was the center of that particular industry. Productivity, and do whatever it takes to be productive. And that has filtered its way through into our overall life. So like now it's not just, I mean, there's no plantations now that exist here in America, but the philosophy behind it and the philosophy that kept people moving has remained, and the legacy is still here. So now we have mothers who are almost stuck in a machine, right? Because it's like, and it's not, I don't even feel like it's a machine that like we're like, oh, I'm in a, we don't even realize that you're in it, because I myself find myself very often being like, okay, I got to go back and do this. I got to do this because, like you said, you got to pay the bills. You've got to, and so I feel like that's something really powerful to like recognize, is that, because I think the guilt probably comes from this feeling like you're doing it wrong. Like, but really what it sounds like based off of what I'm hearing from you is that there's like an internal mechanism within childbearing people once they have the child that naturally tells them what direction they need to, what they need to be doing. Their baby talks to them, they talk to themselves, not like meh, but like, like spiritually or hormonally. But the framework of society is saying do something else. And so it feels almost like you have to force yourself to be something else, do something else, and that your natural instincts are wrong. Do I have that right? Like, am I understanding this correctly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That you really hit it right there. Our society is basically telling women their instincts are wrong, 100%. And it, coming back to the plantations and to, importing African people to do our labor for us, um, we also used Black women to nurse our young so that our white women could work or do other things. It wasn't like women entered the workforce primarily. They didn't like go off to jobs. This was before that. This was still, we're talking about the 1800s. So it wasn't a big shift for women to enter the workforce and go to factories and things like that. But Black women would be forced to nurse white babies. And then they wouldn't have enough milk to nurse their own babies. And so there's a whole thing about people of color struggling to nurse their babies now, even today. We are still feeling these effects generationally because there's trauma there.
Mhm.
But the women would have to do other things to maintain the household. So they weren't off working, but they were still being forced by this patriarchal society, the white women, I mean, to be specific. They were still being forced by this patriarchal society to uphold some vision of what men thought that women should be, to maintain the household, to be presentable, to be, to be beautiful, to be the virgin and the beautiful matriarch of the family. And the
Mhm.
price that we paid for that was that we had to give we white women had to give their babies to Black wet nurses. But that generational trauma to the white women also remains because they would literally witness their baby as being nursed by somebody else. And so that bond that the mother is supposed to be having with their own baby is now broken. And that baby is now bonding to the Black slave, but the Black slave is not bonding back to the baby because she is, resenting that baby because she should be using that milk for her baby, but she's being
Mhm.
forced not to. And so like there's this weird generational thing that was happening where the mother's babies are being taken away and the baby isn't really bonding to anybody. And that generational trauma has carried on with us through our lineage.
That makes a lot, like, it really gives a whole new I appreciate it when I see new examples of how generational trauma happens, because I feel like it helps me to understand so much about where we're at now. Because like part of the problem I think for a lot of us is, we feel like this is the way it's always been, right? And it's like, no, this isn't the way it's always been. This is the way it became because there was a period of time during like massive, massive intentional colonialism, which I feel like the colonialism now is more insidious, but a lot of intentional colonialism that created the infrastructure that is kind of forcing the square peg into the round hole now, and we're actually feeling the after effects. These are the aftershocks, of it that and so, there is this idea that, and my therapist introduced me to it, that the Lakota people have, which is the understanding that we are working generationally. So you're making an impact 7 generations down in the future. And I need to really learn this better so that I can actually talk about it with more intelligence. But the idea of having like that, for many of us, we feel like we're made, like the work that you're doing right now, it's such important work, but the change that you're going to affect is not, it's, you're going to help the mothers now, but more importantly than that, it's the children that will be impacted that will then grow up to then impact other people. So we're now talking 2 to 3 generations. We're doing the work for the future, not just for ourselves, which I think is so different from a capitalist society, which is where it's like, it's all about me, 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 me. I got to make money now. I got to do this. It's all about me now, what do I get, as opposed to I am thinking of life as more generational.
No, for sure. And it's coming back to indigenous people. I recently heard about, and I can't remember which tribe it is, or which, anyway, the language, they have no past tense when they speak. So when they are passing on their stories, they are literally taking on the present. I am
Mm-hmm.
feeling this. We are going through this. So as they pass these stories on to the next generation, they are bringing it into the present tense. They are reliving the tale as they tell it. And that makes the memories stay more alive to them. They don't have this like it happened in the past. We did, X person did XYZ, whatever, which is, since I've heard it, I've been trying to use it more often to really think about the things that I say and feel them more often, which is why I keep
Mm-hmm.
saying like we, the white women, or we did this to them, because it helps to bring it more to life. And I'm gonna have an ADHD moment. I'm gonna completely forget what else you said there. Uh, Bring it back to me. Bring it back to
Well,
me.
that's okay. I'm already stuck on this other thing because like you really hit me with this, where it makes me think about
Oh,
like
generations. Yes.
generation.
Oh,
Okay, go with it, and then I'm going to come back to what you just said.
okay, so it's the same thing as like living in the generation, remembering it as it happened to me, because we are carrying that with us, right? We know that there is our DNA does change based on the things that happened to the generations before us. So the DNA
Mhm.
of our ancestors is also going to, or our descendants is also going to change. There's also a saying that we are the caretakers of the earth, but we're not really the caretakers of this earth. What we are is we are borrowing this earth from our children and our children's children. So, like, if we want this world to remain, we need to make sure that we're leaving it okay for the next people to use it.
Mhm.
That was the thing that I was thinking of. I'm good now.
Okay, I'm going to jump back to what you said, and then okay. So what I find really interesting about this idea of not having a past tense and saying we and that kind of thing, and like bringing it really into the present, is that it answers a very powerful question about like something that's always bothered me a lot is when people say, well, I didn't enslave anybody and I wasn't, I didn't. And I was like, yes, we all are very aware that you didn't go somewhere and kidnap somebody and bring them here. However, right? Um, Collectively, this is a generational burden that exists, right? A generational responsibility, a generational. I'm trying to avoid using the word sin just because it has such a religious connotation, but I do really think of it as a generational, as a sin that occurred that is owed redemption, or however, like I'm not proper necessarily phrasing it right, but you hear a lot of people say, I've never said this. I have to say that out loud because it's really important that people know I would never say this. But there are people who their argument is that it happened so long ago. Why are you still harping on this? Right. And obviously, those of us who spend a lot of time with people that are not, that have experienced this kind of trauma, we know why, because it's, it's not in the past, it's in the present. But even more than that, I think when you think about the language not having a past tense, it means that everything is happening right now. And of course, they just, when you go into quantum, the quantum realm of time, everything is actually happening right now. So now science is coming in with like the spiritual side of it. But I think it makes a lot more sense now why two people having a conversation could have such trouble connecting if one person on one side is feeling everything is happening right now, and the other person on the other side believes in the past, as if put the past in the past, right? And by the way, the only people who say put the past in the past are people who are guilty. Nobody else actually says that. And they don't want to actually make amends, right? In whatever way. So I find this to be really interesting. This is a new idea for me. And so I'm going to take some time to marinate on it. So I'm actually really excited that you shared this because I find there's a lot of wisdom in that, because in Star Trek, in Deep Space Nine, when Cisco, right at the very beginning, when he meets the wormhole aliens and he's talking to them, and they keep asking him, "Why do you exist here?" in the moment where his wife Jennifer died, and he didn't understand. He's like, "I'm not. I live in the future. She died 4 years ago. I'm fine." They're like, "No, you exist here in this spot. Like when your wife died, you never left this spot. Like you emotionally, you mentally, your physical body may have moved into the future, but you're still here." And that was, I find that to be a very profound, I know, right? Are you getting chills? I'm getting chills.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm feeling that 100%. Like that is such a powerful, I love Star Trek for this reason, because they get it right so many times, right? Gene Roddenberry, oh, brilliant man. Okay.
No, he gave us so much.
He did give us so much. He had such a great vision, and Lucille Ball for picking it up in the first place, right?
Yes,
Let's all
absolutely.
give it up for Lucy.
I know, for Lucille Ball, amazing.
Yes. No, I want to come back to this science meets spirituality for just a second here,
Yeah.
because as a woman, as a female body, um, with a uterus with eggs, right? If you are carrying the fetus of a female body, another female body,
Okay.
we know that that female is born with all the eggs that she will ever carry in her ovaries, that the egg cells already exist when she is born. So as a mother, I have my daughter inside me. I have my grandchild inside me.
Wow. When you started saying that, I was like, oh my God, is she going to say what I think she's going to say? I'm like, this is going to fuck my brain up, isn't it? It
It
totally
is.
just
It
fucked
is.
my brain up.
And so whether my grandchild is a boy or a girl, it starts off with that egg, right? So I have a direct maternal link to both my grandmother and my granddaughter. So when we talk about things that cross generations, we are talking about 6 generations at a time. I know you said 7, but literally in a line, we're talking about 6. My grandmother, my mother, to me, to my daughter. So 5, sorry, 5, to my grandchild. 5 generations in a line from whatever happens. This is and then it moves on to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation.
Right.
And so on down the line. We also know that there are cellular changes to human beings and other animals based on trauma that happens within the maternal line, and that those changes get passed down the maternal line as well. So it all comes back to that memory, that how we keep telling our stories to each other, and our bodies also carry those stories.
Absolutely. And I believe over the years, I've had so many flashes and memories and things that I'm like, you know what? Like for many years, I don't know what I believed in. I think I was like science. I was trying to be too skeptical or whatnot. I didn't really believe in much of anything for a while. But even when I was saying, "Oh, I don't believe in anything," I still always felt deep in my soul that like, because there's things that I know and I didn't know how they happened. And at one point I realized, you know what? Science is just too antiquated. Like science has not caught up with spirituality. And so I just need to wait, because science will eventually figure out how this happens. Right now, I just need to accept that this is what happens.